idea of the duality of Jerusalem, of this idea that it's more than one thing, right? And here you see another example of that. You hear from Isaiah and now from Revelation, and Jerusalem becomes not just that place on the map, so to speak, but it also becomes that type that we hear being used about the future, ideal future that is to come. And so we're going to look at this a little bit today in various ways, but I'd like you to help me a little bit. And to begin with, I'd like to ask David, so when we read the Isaiah passage, it's one thing to read a text, it's also important to read context. So what's the context of this text, David?
So this is from one of the last chapters of the book of Isaiah, and Isaiah is at this point prophesying to a people in exile. We divide the book of Isaiah into first and second, and sometimes into first, second, and third Isaiah as a sort of scholarship step, because we think that in fact there may be three different authors writing over time, to all of whom get attributed this one single book called the book of Isaiah, and this is from the later portions and the later author. This is a people in exile to whom Isaiah is speaking, a people that has been exiled from Jerusalem by the Babylonians, and the prophecy he's offering here is clearly a prophecy that speaks to the pain that they know, and speaks to a hope that he wants them to have. So when you hear the no more parts, no more shall, those are likely descriptions of what the people hearing this speech have experienced. And the hope he's holding out for them is a hope that is the manna that will help them to survive.
Wonderful. So this is written during a period of exile. Now, in Israel's experience, exile represented a kind of, the Babylonian exile, a kind of new captivity, right? And so the language is reminiscent of return again, and the hope to go back to the promised land where once they were delivered to, the people were delivered to, and so much of this is written with a kind of reminiscence of what most singular event? The Exodus, right? All right, so we're in Babylon, no doubt, and there is this sense that if God has done this once, then our life is to be interpreted now in light of what God has once done. It goes back to this idea of patterns. Okay? As a matter of fact, there's actually another aspect of this, because probably during this period, the first creation account is written too. And curiously enough, that creation account is probably using much the same kind of background to be written, where and God separated the heavens from the firmament, right? And so the sea that parted represents a kind of pathway. The land appears, and so there's this sort of creation account that is a way of refuting the power structure and the gods of Babylon, who over and over again use their might to tell the people that might is right, and that our gods, therefore, are designed to keep the social order the way it is. But if the experience of the Exodus meant anything, it is that the world isn't fated, that there is new possibility to come, and something may take place where the gods of the people are conquered by the true God, and in the same way, it's not just the God of Israel, but the God of the whole world, who began it all that way, and creation becomes a kind of Exodus motif. Out of chaos, life. And so this goes backward, in a sense, and then Isaiah, in speaking about that same motif, assures the people that new creation is coming, and that they may go back again in this sort of new exodus, a new return that will bring them to Jerusalem. And they needed this encouragement, let's be honest. I mean, this was a period of extraordinary, although there were moments of great flourishing, surely, in Babylon, unlike in Egypt. Nonetheless, there was always the longing and desire for that greater experience of homeland, of being at home, and Jerusalem represents that as a type. And so Jerusalem is used for that purpose. Now, when we get to the book of Revelation, this is the last book of the New Testament, the last book of the Christian Bible, and what is happening is a similar circumstance. But now persecution, Jews and Christians both being persecuted at the end of the first century by the Emperor Domitian, and there is a tremendous question about if all of this was supposed to be true that we have banked our lives on, why are we still enduring persecution at the hands of an oppressive regime? And so the question is, how can we find hope in the midst of this time? And here at the very end, while people are trying to hold their faith and stay encouraged, we have the writer John, who receives this revelation, and the vision he gets, the picture he gets, is that of the New Jerusalem coming down from God. And it is a picture that goes back to Isaiah, and so it is again being used, a pattern being used to say, but now this time, not just Jerusalem as Jerusalem per se, but Jerusalem as the world that God is remaking entirely in a new creation. So why use Jerusalem like that? I think it's important to recognize in poetry and apocalyptic that the poet W.H. Auden once said that poetry, all poetry is, let's see, how do you say it? A poet wants his poetry always to be local, but prized everywhere. And so what we have here is a figure that is discernible, recognizable Jerusalem, but now it universalizes, in a sense, so that everyone can experience through this this idea of what God is bringing to pass for the world. Now, when you heard Brad or John Jay read, I'd like you to tell me, what were some of the things that struck you? Let's just talk about that. Phrases. What phrases struck you or made you quizzical?
George, the passage about the wolf and the lamb together.
Yeah, right. Natural enemies, right? Lying down together. Okay, so it's about the peace of Jerusalem. It's about that all the world will be at peace, not just human beings. And so that's part of that hope. Good. Yes.
The serpent shall only have dust.
The serpent shall only have dust. Why do you think?
Forever cursed. Not much to thrive on.
Right. Right. So it's like, in other words, what will take place is that the serpent, who appears in what story to begin with? Right. As sort of a threatening beast, will no longer be able to threaten, right, in the new creation. Good. Okay. Yes.
Sort of puzzle. It's not just a new Jerusalem or
Yes.
new earth,
Right.
but it's a new heaven.
Excellent. Yes. Right. So something to think about here is, what is heaven and earth, right? And I think we really we have a way in popular imagination of thinking we live on the earth, and when we die, we go to heaven, right? But a little more concretely, you might say that what earth is the visible aspect of creation. Heaven, the invisible aspect of creation. That is the life of God among us and the company of God. And so the idea is that all things will be made new, things that are seen and unseen. Okay. Does that make sense? Brad?
There's also the recurring theme, which also appears frequently in the Torah, of reward for good. And punishment for bad. I'm keeping an eye on both of these.
Justice.
I'm glad. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, notice how this ends, right? So sometimes Christians have a pretty rightful judgment that we don't really care about works, about behavior, good or bad, because God forgives our sins, so it's all about grace and that sort of thing. But